So the question is, how do all of these things that we've just mentioned relate to this deity, Dionysus? How do they relate to one another? In essence, what is or who is Dionysus? What is he a manifestation of? As Otto would say, when God manifests himself to the Greeks in the form of Dionysus, what was that original manifestation whose sad remnants are now these artistic works which we have seen years later? What vision of God was presented to the ancient Greeks that Dionysus is the remnant of? Well, here we could go either one of two ways. The most commonly accepted answer to that question is simply that Dionysus was an agricultural deity responsible for the production of wine. And from that point, almost all religious historians will somehow or other try to pull in these diverse elements, linking it to wine itself. Or we can go the way that Otto went, and that is that the original manifestation of God, of Dionysus, was something very profound, something very awesome, awful, tremendous. It was an insight which shook them to their very existence. And things like the ivy and the wine and all the other things are just a remnant of this original manifestation. So what was it that God presented to the Greeks? Well, here we have to divert ourselves for a few moments and look at the Greek attitudes towards life and death. The Greeks believed throughout most of their history that life and death were eternally co-present, that life draws upon death and death comes, of course, from the living. They believed that in every newborn baby, the dead ancestors came back to life in that person. And whenever a child was born, when it was named, when it reached puberty, married, at all these tremendous ceremonies, the ancestors would always be invoked because they still lived in that person, even though they were dead to the world. So the Greeks always viewed life and death literally as two sides of the same coin, one not separable from the other. They also had a tendency, again generalizing, to state that things only had meaning and value insofar as they were viewed within the parameters of life and death. Things like youth and beauty, which were especially prized by the Greeks and lauded by the Greeks, they would have been of no account, of course, if youth never ended and if beauty was common to everyone. Their value was in their rarity and in their transitory nature. The Greeks have this rather ambivalent attitude towards our sojourn here on earth. But when it comes to their next life, things become even more depressing for the Greeks. In the time of Homer, it was generally believed by the Greeks that all the souls of the departed went to the kingdom of Hades. And here, unless you did something particularly heinous, usually a sin against the gods, you led the life that everyone who died leads. There's an episode in the Odyssey when Odysseus has to go into the underworld to consult the spirits about what lies ahead for him. And as he comes down, he finds all the souls of the departed, people he has known, and they're all listless shades, described as being gray, just moping around in the underworld. And in fact, he cannot get a reply from any of them until he gives them blood that they lap up and come momentarily back to life and speak again. Well, as he goes making the rounds of his old acquaintances, giving them the blood to lap up, he finally comes to Achilles. This, of course, is after the Trojan War, after Achilles has died. And Odysseus then confronts Achilles saying, "Well, you, the most valiant warrior before the walls of Troy, surely it must be great to be down here as a king amongst the dead." He says, "I would rather be the meanest slave of the poorest farmer on earth than the king of the dead." Why? Because there was nothing in the afterlife. It was just an eternal existence of despair. There was not at this time in Greek thinking reward and punishment. There was something worse than reward and punishment for all eternity, and that was boredom. Boredom forever and ever. Then along came Dionysus, and he offered the Greeks a new insight into life and death. And that was not that there was just life after death. Everybody knew the soul was immortal. All societies of the Mediterranean believed in the immortality of the soul. Dionysus offered his followers, his adherents, the fact and the knowledge that there was a blessed afterlife, that there was salvation, that by following Dionysus they could achieve something other than the despair of eternal boredom. The manifestation that turns into Dionysus is the knowledge which Dionysus presented, or the knowledge the Greeks got from God of salvation. They are the first ones in the Mediterranean world that have promulgated this idea of a blessed afterlife.